Good morning. My name is Meredith Barber, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our worship service this morning. I'm the interim minister here at Horizon Unitarian Universalist Church. We're glad that you've joined us for worship this morning, and if you'd like to know more about our church, information can be found at our website, horizonuu.org. We also welcome you to join our virtual coffee hour after the service, and the link can be found on our website as well. I do have one really exciting announcement that I'm glad to be able to share with you this morning. One I think we've been waiting quite a long time for. Next week, November 7th, will be our first in-person worship service in a very, very long time. I'd like to invite you to check your email. You'll be hearing from Horizon about how to reserve a space for our worship service. We're going to observe social distancing and masking measures, and our socializing after the service will take place outdoors. I invite you to keep in mind that this is our first time doing this in a really long time. So lean into joy and embrace the imperfection. We're all learning together. I invite you to keep your sense of humor handy. With that said, I cannot wait to see hopefully many of you next week for our in-person worship services. Thank you so much. Our worship service will now begin. Our call to worship this morning comes from the writings of Katie Romano Griffin. Come, let us enter into this space of hope and community. Come, let us enter into this space with our sorrows, our joys, our passion, and compassion. Come, let us enter this space with the stories of our ancestors, for their strength and wisdom beats in our hearts. Come into this space, present to the beloved companions who move beside us. Come into this space mindful that together we are building a future for other generations. Come into this space and let us worship. We light our chalice this morning with these words from the writer May Sarton. Absence becomes the greatest presence. I invite you to join me now in saying together the words of our affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church, the quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in harmony with the earth. Thus do we covenant together.
What wondrous love is this, O my soul, O my soul? What wondrous love is this, O my soul? What wondrous love is this, that brings my heart such bliss, and takes away the pain of my soul, and takes away the pain of my soul. When I was sinking down, sinking down, sinking down, when I was sinking down, sinking down, when I was sinking down beneath the sorrow's ground, friends to me gathered round, O my soul, friends to me gathered round, O my soul. To love and to all friends I will sing, I will sing. To love and to all friends I will sing. To love and to all friends who pain and sorrow mend. With thanks unto the end I will sing, I will sing. With thanks unto the end I will sing.
Have you ever heard or listened for a message that wasn't spoken out loud, and maybe it felt like someone or something was speaking to you, but really wasn't? You heard it in your heart? This happens to me at my house this time of year. And let me explain, it is not as spooky as it sounds. So I'm joining you from my home, and today I am broadcasting from in front of my grandmother's display cabinet. It came from her house, and it's probably over 100 years old. I remember it when I was a child, and it was an antique back then. And it's filled with items, special items from my family members, many of whom are deceased, and from special things from our lives. And behind me, you can see a clock that's from in display cabinet. And if you listen real closely, you might even be able to hear it ticking. And this clock has special meaning for me since it reminds me of my grandmother when I hear it, because it used to go tick tock in her hallway or chime, and I could hear it all throughout her house. And Grandma has been gone for about 20 years now, and yet all of these items help me stay close to her. It's the end of October, and in the Northern Hemisphere, many cultures have holidays and rituals to remember their dead. Halloween, Samhain, Dia de los Muertos, and of course, All Souls Day. We at Horizon are commemorating All Souls Day because it's important to remember our ancestors and to bring them forth to our minds and to our hearts. And when we do this, we learned that we are still held in the love they showed us and our love for them. And we carry their memory forward with us into the future. And this is a good way to think about our monthly theme, too. Our theme is cultivating relationship, and that we are cultivating our relationship with the memories of those who have gone before us. Saying goodbye to a loved one is one of the most difficult things we will ever do. The process is made a little less painful when we honor and remember their memories. And what's more, grief experts tell us that taking steps to remember loved ones actually is essential for healing. Individuals who keep the memory of their loved ones alive almost always fare better emotionally than those who don't. This time of year, when we have rituals or activities of remembrance, they're so important because it shows us that our loved one's life will be honored and remembered for years to come. It provides a place and a time for us to talk about them, to hear stories about them, and share our memories of them with others. And we learn to keep their memory alive. Because one of the main ways UUs can remain connected to our past is by remembering that, yes, people die, but our relationship and our love for them don't. Actively remembering loved ones who have died is what keeps us with them always. You might not have something like a display case full of items from your loved one or a clock from their hallway that you can actually hear, but your memories of your love for them and their love for you will be with you always. These are like the messages and voices from them that we can hear with our hearts. Psychologist Alison England Drake wrote, "When someone you love becomes a memory, their memory becomes a treasure." We miss them so much, and yet they and their love are still here.
So this is the very last part of October, and our Share the Plate offering this month benefits the Afia Center, a local Dallas organization committed to the reproductive health of Black women. And some of their current initiatives involve research to reduce the maternal mortality rates of Black women in Texas, working to protect abortion access, education around HIV, and working to build a Black women-centered reproductive justice movement here in Texas. The offering will now be joyfully given and received. Our first reading this morning is a poem by the writer Marie Howe, and it's called What the Living Do. Johnny, the kitchen sink has been clogged for days. Some utensil probably fell down there. And the Drano won't work but smells dangerous. And the crusty dishes have piled up, waiting for the plumber I still haven't called. This is the everyday we spoke of. It's winter again. The sky's a deep, headstrong blue, and the sunlight pours through the open living room windows because the heat's on too high in here and I can't turn it off. For weeks now, driving or dropping a bag of groceries in the street, the bag breaking, I've been thinking, this is what the living do. And yesterday, hurrying along those wobbly bricks in the Cambridge sidewalk, spilling my coffee down my wrist and sleeve, I thought it again, and again later when buying a hairbrush. This is it. Parking, slamming the car doors shut in the colds, what you called that yearning, what you finally gave up. We want the spring to come and the winter to pass. We want whoever to call or not call, a letter, a kiss. We want more and then more of it. But there are moments, walking, when I catch a glimpse of myself in the window glass, say the window of the corner video store, and I'm gripped by a cherishing so deep for my own blowing hair, chapped face, and unbuttoned coat that I'm speechless. I am living. I remember you. I invite you to join me now in a time of meditation or prayer. Afterwards, we'll hear our responsive hymn, Spirit of Life. Spirit of life, God of many names and no name, be with us this morning and know our hearts. We give thanks for the blessing of being this morning, for the chance to sing, to share the ups and downs of life, to take time to be still and to know. We give thanks as well for the world around us, for the first bits of fall we soak up desperately, for the leaves we will to brighten. We celebrate this season and move into the time of our year when the days get shorter and darkness comes earlier. Today we also mark All Saints' Day, a time in our year when we remember those we have lost. For some, the grief is fresh and raw, for others, a dull ache, and for still others, something different altogether. Yet we all bring memories into this space. Spirit, let us lean into this time when the veil is thin, where we make space for grief we might otherwise push aside. For all who know that grief is a spiral, spinning up and down, around. For those of us who recognize that healing is not linear and may never come. For all those who know that grief is a sign that we have loved, we give thanks. We grieve also for our world. We feel its pain. We worry for and cry with all those who are hurting, knowing that all people are part of an interconnected web of existence. We enter this space holding in our hearts all of the ways we have fallen short, that we have failed, that we have broken our covenant with the holy and with one another. And yet we know that we are welcomed back into the fold to try again and again to get it right. May it be so. Amen.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the heart, giving life the shape
Our second reading this morning comes from the writings of the Reverend Leslie Takahashi, and it's called Immortality. She writes, "In the daily weave of our lives, those who have died are still strong guiding threads. Theirs is the golden glimmer, or perhaps the brilliant red or the melancholy blue. They are still part of the whole cloth of our lives. They are the ancestors, the goers before. Through this we know immortality. In the hour-to-hour rush of our daily tasks, they travel with us through something they taught us, which is now ours to do, through something they loved, which is now ours to carry out, through something we shared, which is now ours alone and yet not. Through this we know immortality. In the minute-to-minute grasp of where we are, we remember the joys our departed gave us, which opened us up to hope, the sorrows we knew together, which taught us strength, the life shared, which is now ours to steward. Through this, we know immortality. In the second-to-second pulse of life, we sense the spirit of those we have loved and lost. This presence is too shy for naming, too amorphous for full knowing, and yet as real as the days we shared. Through this, we know immortality. They are more than remembered. They are memory itself. For what we love lives on in the way our beloved dead accompany us through our life. Their words and wisdom our guide, their humor our relief, their restless concern for the world our charge. Through this, we know immortality. So all month we've been talking about relationships, about covenants, what we promise to one another, and how we want to be together. But today we gather together to honor the relationships we have with those who have passed on from this life. The promises we make to one another, the way we care for one another, the love we hold in our hearts does not end when someone dies. Rather, the way we hold these things within us changes. So today we'll try to do a bit of contextualizing of Halloween, of All Souls Day, and then move to thinking about the way we honor the ancestors that have come before us. Samhain is a pagan religious festival originating from an ancient Celtic spiritual tradition. In modern times, Samhain is usually celebrated from October 31st to November 1st to welcome in the harvest and usher in the dark half of the year. Many believe that the barriers between the physical world and the spirit world break down during Samhain, allowing more interaction between humans and those who dwell in the spirit worlds. In ancient times, Samhain was a Celtic fire festival that took place halfway between the fall equinox and the winter solstice. During this time of year, hearth fires in family homes were left to burn out while the harvest was gathered. And once the work of the harvest was complete, a big communal fire was lit. And participants in that ritual would take the fire back to their homes to relight their own hearth fires. Samhain continued to be celebrated throughout the Middle Ages, and eventually new things were added, like candles inside carved turnips called jack-o'-lanterns, which eventually became pumpkins. And as Christianity spread to this part of the world, church leaders attempted to reframe Samhain as a kind of Christian celebration. There was an attempt first to move the celebration to the spring and to use it to honor saints and martyrs, but of course this didn't stop the fire festivals that took place in the fall. There was still a human need to light the darkness that could not be ignored. Then in the 9th century, Pope Gregory moved the celebration back to the fall and to the time of the traditional fire festivals and declared November 1st All Saints' Day. It's interesting to me that this concept of our loved ones actually coming back to visit, or that there's some sort of connection during this time of the year, extends across many cultures and traditions. I think it's a way for us to acknowledge that they're still here, only in a different way. And these rituals speak to our human need for some way to physically mark our relationships with those who have died, and to know that they continue long after they've left us. So today, we acknowledge those who have gone before us. We honor ancestors who have shaped our lives. We grieve those that are no longer with us. And we acknowledge that relationships continue long after death. Regardless of what you might believe about what comes after this life, love extends beyond this reality. Later in the service, we'll view the slideshow of photos you all sent in, and we will hold the loss together. As Leslie Takahashi reminded us in the reading, in the daily weaving of our lives, those we love are present. She wrote, "In the second-to-second pulse of life, we sense the spirit of those we have loved and lost. This presence is too shy for naming, too amorphous for full knowing, and yet as real as the days we shared. Through this, we know immortality." And I do think there's something special about this time of year, this time when darkness starts to come earlier and it gets colder. There's more of a drawing in, a staying in where it's warm, more time for reflection on the whirlwind surrounding us. But in the darkness, the stars show up clearly. And I'm reminded of the benediction words from my home congregation about love that holds us across time and death and the space between the stars. Across all the layers and things unseen and unexplained, love remains. I think that we Westerners, or maybe Americans especially, can have a difficult time with death. Our culture can be kind of death phobic almost. One could say maybe it's an extension of white supremacy culture. The idea that we should somehow be able to shield ourselves from anything we aren't ready to deal with, anything unpleasant, until our time comes. We try not to talk about it. People who are dealing with serious illness are constantly encouraged to be fighters and warriors. But what happens when that doesn't work? Or when we just get tired? And then it's all the more scary, uncertain, because we've spent our whole lives refusing to acknowledge this thing. And we, our society as a whole, kind of put it somewhere over there, in hospitals, care facilities, and we don't go there unless we have to. It was not until a few years ago that a friend pointed out to me that in other cultures, the idea of care facilities, it's not really a thing. They care for their elderly and their sick at home. And of course, I'm not making any judgments about any decision people need to make when it comes to care for their loved ones. Our society as a whole is not set up to respect or support caregiving. Throughout the entire pandemic, those in caregiving roles have been shouting from the rooftops, "We're not okay." And society, our political representatives, it seems to, still cannot hear us. And it didn't used to be this way either, this distancing of ourselves from death. I was listening to a podcast recently talking about the death of Edgar Allan Poe and the Victorian era's acknowledgement of death as a reality of life, maybe bordering on fascination with death. It was common in those days for people to die of things we wouldn't now, thanks to modern medicine. There were memento moris, often rings or lockets with the hair of the deceased inside, reminders that one day each of us will die. In Christian traditions, Ash Wednesday is also a reminder of this. You receive ashes on your head and you're told, "Remember you are dust, and to dust you shall return." It's harsh in one way and comforting in another. On one hand, it can cause us to feel insignificant, but on the other hand, that's kind of the point. The idea that we are all returning to a part of the same whole. I'm not really one for modern country, but there's something about Americana that I find soul-soothing. And I recently came across this Tyler Childers song called Universal Sound. He sings about being connected to something he calls the universal sound. I recall when I was a baby, I didn't need nothing around but a little bitty rattler and the universal sound. I focus on my breathing and the universal sound. I let it take me over from the toenails to the crown of the body that I'm in till they put me in the ground, and I return to the chorus of the universal sound. It's almost like a different way to talk about the interconnected web. And how beautiful is that ancient idea that we are all forever connected to this kind of sacred rhythm that will never stop, no matter what, that nothing is ever really gone. One of my professors in seminary, Dr. Kimberly Patton, would remind us again and again of that idea that there's an ancient belief that nothing is ever really gone. Rather, it's just with us in a different way. The Unitarian Universalist perspective on death and memorializing our loved ones is one of gratitude. I most often get asked for memorial services that are celebrations of life, that are personal, that include details about who that person really was. Authenticity and truth-telling are at the center. And I've noticed that we care much less about what might come afterwards. We're content, or at least I am, to let the mystery be. But though our heads may intellectually want to move quickly to celebrating that person and the gift that was their life, our hearts tell the truth, and they are hurting. When people leave our lives, they leave a big space behind where loneliness and sadness live. For me, one of the most poignant losses in my own life was actually not a relative or anyone I knew really well, but my 8th grade history teacher. Mr. Letizia had kind of a Danny DeVito energy to him, and I wish I could do better at describing him than that, but he was very short, about 5'2", and balding, but he carried himself with a serious confidence. He's one of those teachers for whom classroom management seems effortless. He was so laid back about everything that if he asked you to do something, you did it, no questions asked. And if he asked you to stop, you really knew you were out of line. One look from him could silence an entire room, but he also had a sense of humor. He was quick to laugh with us, to play music. And for me in particular, this was the first time that I felt seen and uplifted by a teacher for the things that I really was good at and for who I was. Mr. Letizia was my 8th grade history teacher, and he took teaching seriously as a political statement. He introduced us to that famous phrase, history is written by the winners, but he took it a step further, pointing out that the winners have mostly been straight white men with lots of money. And when we would watch movies in class, he made sure to point out the messiness of war. His class was one of the first times where I remember seeing real historical footage from the liberation of concentration camps, the violence against those marching for civil rights. Before that time, these were theoretical concepts that we learned about and understood the seriousness of, but he made us look at the real thing, showing us all that we don't turn away from the things that make us uncomfortable. We bear witness to the fullness of the human experience. I remember when I found out he died, I was in college, and I was toying with the idea of becoming a teacher myself. When I heard the news, I was sitting on my couch in my apartment, and there were just immediate tears. In some way, that loss hit me harder than some of the others in my life before or since. I remember talking to someone about it and saying, I get that people die, but I just need him to be there in his classroom for things to feel like they're okay. But what I've found over the years is that those who pass away become a part of us as time goes on. Even someone that I may not have had the closest relationship, like a teacher, the lessons he offered, especially at such a formative time in our lives, in my own life, live on in all of the people that he taught. The idea that we don't look away from some of the most painful things in life, that is now one of the privileges of my ministry, to be able to be there with people through it all. And I think that's the gift we talk about when we celebrate people's lives. We never really know who we're impacting and how and for how long. When we share stories and memories and laugh and cry in the honor of someone who has passed on, we keep their memory alive within us. We honor them. I've heard it said that grief can be like a spiral. You move outward from the actual loss, and things move in ups and downs. As time passes, things get a little easier for a while. You think you're on an upswing, doing okay, getting through the day. And then something hits you. A song, a memory, the way the sunlight glints off the trees, and suddenly you're back down at the bottom of the spiral, back to the beginning, and the loss feels fresh and new again. Our grief is not linear, but comes in waves. And though it doesn't always feel good to hurt like this, it is a sign that we haven't numbed out or let the stress of everyday life take over. We are still human beings, very much in tune with the joys and the sorrows of life. And to grieve is also a sign that we have loved deeply, and that in itself is a gift. In Marie Howe's poem, What the Living Do, it will get you. It will get you. The first time I heard it was at an All Souls service when I lived in Cambridge, and that line about cobblestones and coffee spilling down your sleeve in the cold winter day felt so real. And Howe is right, it's the mundane, day-to-day things that can be the most difficult about the way a relationship changes. The broken sink that she doesn't know how to fix. The poem is a letter to her beloved, almost the way you talk on the phone if that person were still here to talk to. Being the one left behind is the hardest part. Anne Lamott writes, "You will lose someone you can't live without, and your heart will be badly broken. And the bad news is that you never completely get over the loss of your beloved. But this is also the good news. They live forever in your broken heart that doesn't seal back up, and you come through. It's like having a broken leg that never heals perfectly, that still hurts when the weather gets cold, but you learn to dance with the limp." And so I'm thinking this morning about all the people we carry with us, the impacts they've made on us, large and small, in ways seen and unseen, the ways they become a part of us. And in these days, when the veil grows thin and the world grows darker, I invite you to feel the love surrounding you from some other place, across time and death and the space between the stars. May it be so. Amen. We come now to the time in our service where we will honor those we love who have passed on from this life. We enter into this time with a blessing written by the Reverend Kathleen McTeague. This is called They Are With Us Still. In the struggles we choose for ourselves, and in the ways we move forward in our lives and bring our world forward with us, it is right to remember the names of those who gave us strength in this choice of living. It is right to name the power of hard lives well lived. We share a history with those lives. We belong to the same motion. They too were strengthened by what had gone before. They too were drawn on by the vision of what might come to be. Those who lived before us, who struggled for justice and suffered injustice before us, have not melted into dust and have not disappeared. They are with us still. The lives they lived hold us steady. Their words remind us and call us back to ourselves. Their courage and love evoke our own. We, the living, carry them with us. We are their voices, their hands, and their hearts. We take them with us, and with them choose the deeper path of living. We extinguish the flame of this chalice, but not our commitment to our mission to welcome radically, love boldly, grow spiritually, and serve courageously. We carry this commitment in our hearts because we envision a beloved community filled with compassion, helping all to thrive in a just world.
I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow, I've got pain like an arrow, I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow, I've got pain like an arrow, I've got pain like an arrow in my soul.
Friends, as we go forth from our time together this morning, my hope for you is that across time and death and the space between the stars, you remember love. Go in peace.